Alrighty, the Comics Kid 2099 here, and I have a movie that I want to talk with you guys about. Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. This is a prequel slash spin-off film based on the TV series Twin Peaks. It came out, I think, the year or 2 years after the series ended. It wasn't very long after the series ended, and basically the premise of this movie, huge spoilers for the TV series Twin Peaks, so if you still want to see that series, I'm going to be spoiling that series since this is kind of a prequel but also a sequel to Twin Peaks. So, the character of Laura Palmer, who is dead in the TV series, her death kicks off the plot of the TV series. This movie is the last week or the last few days of her life, and that's basically the premise here. She was basically just a MacGuffin in the TV series. Her death kind of catalyzes everything that happens in the series. Well, here we get to actually see her as a character, and she's not just a plot device. And so that's basically the movie that we get here. And this movie is very divisive, not just within Twin Peaks fandom, but also for me. I am very divided on how I feel about this movie. There is a lot of stuff about it that is very strange, and of course, it's a Twin Peaks thing, so that's to be expected, but also it's a David Lynch thing, and that's to be expected. But this movie was even stranger than I expected. I thought Twin Peaks, the series, was pretty weird. This was even weirder than the series, and that really took me by surprise. But there's a lot of things that are weird, and then there's things that are just straight up bad that don't work, and then there's things about this movie that really do work. And so I know how I feel about this movie, but it's going to be very difficult for me to actually put into words how I feel about this movie. Number one, I want to talk about the first 20 minutes of the movie. And this is the most cuttable part of the movie, the part that you could very easily remove and it would change the rest of the movie almost not at all. But at the same time, the first 20 minutes or so of the movie is my favorite part of the movie. You start with Chris Isaak, the musician. He is playing a character called Chet Desmond, who works for the FBI, and he and Kiefer Sutherland, playing a character named Sam, they are going to a place called Deer Meadow to investigate the death of a girl named Teresa Banks. And if you have seen Twin Peaks, the TV series, in the first episode, Dale Cooper very briefly mentions that there was a girl in a neighboring town who died under very similar circumstances to Laura Palmer. And we get to see the investigation of that death. The first, I want to say it's about the first 20 minutes or so of the movie, adds almost nothing at all to the death of Laura Palmer. And this is supposed to be Laura Palmer's story. It's supposed to be focused on her, and as we get to see her life unravel, and all this duality about her, how she's the homecoming queen that everyone in town loves, but also she's got all this really messed up stuff going on in her life. We're supposed to be getting that movie. And the first 20 minutes or so of this film is not that. It's these FBI agents uncovering the death of this girl in another town, and it has really, at first, it seemingly has nothing to do with Laura Palmer at all. Now, we later find out that she is connected to Laura Palmer, and that death also is connected to Laura Palmer's death. But you could still cut this out of the movie, and it really wouldn't hurt the movie. All you need to know is that this girl was killed by the same person who killed Laura Palmer, and you get that information in the TV series. Eventually, you find out who killed Laura Palmer in the TV series, and we were already told in the series that Laura Palmer's death was almost identical to Teresa Banks' death. So we really didn't need a full 20 minutes of this movie showing us that Teresa Banks' death was very similar to Laura Palmer's. Having said that, the first 20 minutes or so of this film is my favorite part of the entire film. And I want to go ahead and say, I think I personally would have been much happier with this movie if it had been just a story focused on the FBI within the world of Twin Peaks. If we could have gotten a movie with Dale Cooper or Wyndham Earle before he went crazy, or Chet Desmond or Kiefer Sutherland's character have Gordon Cole be kind of giving these guys missions, if we could have had all these guys in some weird, crazy David Lynchian prequel to Twin Peaks that has nothing to do with the town of Twin Peaks, doesn't have anything to do with Laura Palmer, that would have been really interesting. I think I would have been much more invested in that than the movie that we got. Basically, it would have been like the first 20 minutes of this movie just stretched out into its own film instead of trying to be this first act that has nothing to do with the second and third acts. It's really strange that this beginning of the movie, I love it so much. I love it much more than the rest of the movie, and at the same time, it has nothing to do with this movie. And that's unfortunate because I think that one one problem that I have with this movie is that David Lynch is trying to fit some 30-odd hours of Twin Peaks lore into a 2-hour film. Twin Peaks ran for about 30 episodes, and there was a lot of loose plot lines by the end of that series. There was a lot of mythology that was built up but never actually paid off, and I think David Lynch, maybe part of it is just unrealistic expectations from the fans. Maybe the fans were expecting this movie to answer every question that they ever had about the series of Twin Peaks, and that, of course, is a ridiculous expectation. But I think David Lynch was also trying to pay off some of that stuff, and I feel like 2 hours is just not enough time to do that. Now, there is a rumor that there's like an extra hour, hour and a half of this movie that didn't make it into the final cut. A lot of characters from the TV show that you know and love, they don't show up in this movie. Characters like Ed, any of the police officers, Donna's family, Audrey, Ben Horne, Pete Martell, Catherine, what's her name? The girl who, Jodie Packer, all those characters, they don't make it into this movie, and allegedly, they did make it into the extended cut. Now, I don't even know if there is an extended cut out there that's available to be seen. I've just heard rumors that there is more stuff out there that didn't make it into the final cut of the movie. All I've seen is the final cut of the movie, and I have to say, after watching this movie, we're probably okay not seeing any of the police officers. We're probably okay not seeing Andy or Lucy or Harry or Hawk. We're fine not seeing Ben Horne or Jodie Packer or any of the people who work at the sawmill. Again, this is Laura's story, and so the more of those characters who you cut from this movie so that it can be Laura's story, the better off you're going to be. And that's why, once again, I'm going to say that this movie very easily and probably should have cut the first 20 minutes of this movie. Now, you would be losing a lot of stuff about the Red Room and the Man from Another Place and the Black Lodge. You'd be losing some stuff that's kind of explored in that first 20 minutes of the movie, but it's not explored very well. It's kind of just touched upon, and then more questions are brought up, but they're not answered. For example, Chet Desmond disappears. The character played by Chris Isaac, he disappears. We don't know where he went. There's theories about where he went, and I have a pretty good idea that those theories are correct, but this movie just introduces these plot points and then doesn't do anything with them. And that's problematic, especially when this movie is supposed to be Laura Palmer's story. And that is a defense that a lot of defenders of this movie will pull up. They will say, well, just because your favorite characters didn't show up in this movie doesn't make it a bad movie. It's supposed to be Laura Palmer's story. It's not supposed to be the story of Dale Cooper exploring the mythology of the Black Lodge and the Red Room and stuff like that. That's not what this movie's supposed to be about. It's supposed to be Laura Palmer's story. Okay, then why is Laura Palmer not even in the first 20 minutes of the movie? That's a problem. This is supposed to be her movie, but for the first third of this film, it doesn't feel like it. It feels like this is some weird, quirky FBI story, and it's not that. And I really wish we could have had Laura's story be the whole movie, or the FBI of Twin Peaks, let that be the whole movie. Maybe do like a trilogy of movies. I know that would have been just completely unrealistic, but I would have liked to have seen multiple films explore different aspects of the world of Twin Peaks. And if Futurama can do it, if Futurama can have multiple films that come back to explore more aspects of the world of Futurama, and of course that's a very different thing since Futurama lasted longer than Twin Peaks, but if Futurama can have multiple film sequels to their series, why can't Twin Peaks do it? Why can't Twin Peaks have the Laura Palmer story? Do the story of Laura Palmer before she died, and then do a story about the Black Lodge and Dale Cooper and all that stuff. Why couldn't you have waited and done a really good story about Laura Palmer, and then if you have more stuff to tell about the world of Twin Peaks, then bring all that other stuff that you wanted to do in Fire Walk with Me and do it in another movie. I think that would have worked very well. I think this movie would have worked better if they had done that. It would have been more well received. Maybe not financially so, but it would have been more well received by fans anyway if they had done that. That's just my opinion. Now, getting to the fact that this is Laura's story, I have to ask the question, is this a movie that is worth telling? Is this a story that we needed to see? I'm going to say no, and it hurts me to say that because the actress who plays Laura Palmer, I don't remember her name right off the top of my head. I think her name is Cheryl Lee. I think that's the name of the actress, but that might be the name of one of the other actresses in this series. Cheryl Lee is actually a really good actress, and that's something I didn't expect going into this movie, because you watch Twin Peaks, the series, and she's basically just a background character. She's almost not even a full-on cameo. You see pictures of her. You see a video of her dancing. You don't don't actually get to see any of her acting. And then later on, the people making the show, they really liked her, so they made her Laura Palmer's identical twin cousin, and you get to see her act a little bit as Maddie, but you don't really get to see her unleash her acting abilities in the series of Twin Peaks. You do get to see that in Fire Walk with Me, and she is astoundingly good. She's really good at playing the homecoming queen girl that everyone loves, the girl next door that doesn't have any problems with her life. She's really good at playing that. And she's also really good at playing this really messed up girl who's borderline psycho, not because of anything that's wrong with her, but because of a lot of stuff that's been done to her throughout her entire life. Someone who has to deal with all of this trauma and keep it buried. Someone who can't let anyone know of what all is going on with her. She's really good at playing all of that. This feels like a real fleshed out three-dimensional character, and that's weird considering she is such a fractured character. She's got a lot of duality going on with her. Like I said, everyone in the town, allegedly, they all thought there was nothing wrong with Laura. Although, if you watch the series, at one point Bobby accuses everyone of saying, you all knew what was wrong with Laura and you didn't do anything about it. So maybe they thought that there was nothing wrong with her, or maybe everyone just was in denial. Who knows? But she's playing this character, this girl next door character, but then she's also playing this other kind of character. And despite the fact that these are two very different characteristics, they really do feel like they're coming from the same place. And I think part of that might be David Lynch coming up with this character who is interesting, and also I think part of it is Sheryl Lee's acting ability. Having said that, I said that this is not a story that we needed to see, and that's because over the span of 30-odd episodes of Twin Peaks, we got to see the character of Laura Palmer through the opinions, through the thoughts and ideas of every other character in the show. We got a glimpse of who Laura Palmer was through Donna and James's interactions with each other. We got to see a little bit of who she was whenever we got to see Bobby talking about her. We got to see a little of who she was when any of these characters who knew her or thought they knew her, whenever they would mention something about Laura Palmer, we got to see a little bit of who she was. And over the course of the series, we got a lot of the information that we get in this movie. And this movie, I hate to say it, it's going to sound really harsh, but this movie, in a lot of ways, it feels like you have drawn 90% of a piece of paper. Like you've taken a piece of paper and you have colored 90% of it, and you've still left 10% of it not colored in. There's 10% of this paper that's still blank, but it looks like a full page because you have colored 90% of it, and it looks like a full picture. But then, about a year or two later, you might pick up that page and say, I'm going to fill in those blanks. I'm going to give people what they want. They want to see the rest of this colored in. And so then you color it in, and it's like, okay, you colored it in, but you didn't really have to do that because the page was pretty much complete before you did that. And I get the feeling that's what we've got going on here. At least that's my interpretation of this movie. At one point, we get to see Laura and Bobby. They are waiting for someone to bring them drugs, and then Bobby murders this dude. In the first episode of Twin Peaks, James is talking to Donna, and he mentions this. He says that Laura told him that Bobby killed a guy. That's never ever brought up again in the rest of the series, and it didn't have to be brought up again in the rest of the series. This was just a quick little piece of exposition and character building. It builds the character of Laura Palmer. It builds the character of Bobby. We don't need an exploration of how this happened. And unfortunately, when we see this scene play out, it doesn't really add anything. All we get to see is, okay, Bobby killed a guy. That's exactly what James Hurley said happened. It doesn't add anything to this movie other than it's one of the last things in Laura Palmer's life. And this movie is the last week or few days of Laura Palmer's life. So we really didn't need to see that, but it's here because it was mentioned in the TV series. And that's problematic because I feel like the story of this girl who's trying to keep all of this trauma buried inside, and everyone thinks that she's just the girl next door and there's nothing wrong with her, that is a story that could have been interesting to see, but it's tied to the world of Twin Peaks, and so I feel like that's hampering it and keeping it from being a truly fantastic movie. Partly because we already knew a lot of this stuff going into it, and also because a lot of the Twin Peaks stuff that we get here, a lot of the fans of the series anyway, I feel like they were expecting so much more from this than what they actually got. Some more stuff about this movie. We know from the TV series that Leland Palmer was actually responsible for killing Laura. Leland was Laura's father, and we find out that he was actually possessed by this demonic entity called Bob. At least, that's what we're told in the series, that Bob is this eternal spirit demon, and he possessed Leland Palmer and forced him to rape and kill Laura. And then this movie comes along, and it changes all of that. I'm not saying that it flat out contradicts the series, but it definitely forces the audience to look at the events of the series in a different way. The TV series makes it sound like Leland was very innocent in everything that was happening, and that he didn't want to kill his daughter, but Bob took over his body and kind of made him do it. That he was basically just a puppet, and Bob was the puppet master. That's what the TV series makes you think. The movie, it adds another layer to that. It makes it sound like, okay, Leland is not entirely innocent. Leland, maybe if Bob was completely absent from his mind, Leland might not have done this, but it makes it seem like Leland is not totally innocent, that there was a part of him that was complicit in raping and murdering his daughter, and he wasn't entirely being forced to do it by Bob. And I'm not sure if this is a reveal that works or if it's a reveal that doesn't work. On the one hand, it feels a little bit contradictory with the series. On the other hand, it is an interesting look at this character of Leland Palmer. We've already got a very interesting look at the character of Laura Palmer, and in a way, all of Twin Peaks is about duality. You have the man from the Red Room, and then you've also got his physical, his corporeal body in the real world. Then you have two Mikes and two Bobbies, and then you have two Dale Coopers. You have Laura Palmer, who's playing two different sides of herself. And then you've got Leland, who is maybe completely innocent in the death of his daughter, or maybe not entirely innocent. Maybe Bob just kind of nudged him, and then he did a lot of this on his own. This is another... It adds another level to the world of Twin Peaks, and thematically, it resonates with Twin Peaks, the series, but on the other hand, it does feel a little bit contradictory with the series. So if you liked that aspect of the character of Leland Palmer from the series, if you liked that he was not in control of his actions, then you might not like that reveal in the movie that he maybe was in control of his actions. And it doesn't really come down on a firm answer one way or another. And I'm kind of okay with that because there's quite a bit going on in this movie. Admittedly, like I said, a lot of it is stuff that we kind of gathered from the TV series, but I didn't have to have a firm 100% answer of Leland was or was not responsible for the death of his daughter. It was this demon controlling him, or maybe the demon was just kind of whispering in his ear the whole time. I get the feeling maybe it's a little bit of both, but who knows? The lore of Twin Peaks. There is a mythology that was built up over the series of Twin Peaks. All of that is made much more confusing here. And it's kind of like the Leland Bob thing. Was Leland in control of his actions, or was Bob just kind of gently pushing him? That's kind of made a little bit more confusing in this movie. We get a lot more of that here. In the series, the TV series, I was kind of under the impression that Mike was kind of the opposite number of Bob. Bob is this pure evil demon who's been around since the dawn of time, and Mike is kind of his opposite number. He is maybe not necessarily pure good, but he's fighting against Bob. At least that was what I gathered from watching the series. But then this movie kind of throws that into question. Maybe Mike isn't actually the opposite number. Maybe he's just less evil than Bob. Maybe he's just a jealous brother who doesn't want Bob to take over the body of Laura Palmer. So he's kind of intervening, and he's trying to throw in a wrench in the machine, if you will, trying to stop all that from happening. But he himself is not a good guy. He's not there to stop Laura Palmer from being killed. He doesn't care about that. He just doesn't want Bob to have control of her body and soul. That's kind of another kind of confusion of the mythos, if you will. We also have, there was a woman who showed up in, I think, one episode of Twin Peaks, the series. She was an older lady. Donna brought her some food, and then the old lady, she had a nephew who was a magician, and then later Donna goes back to her house, and the old lady never lived there. It was a different lady with the same name, but she wasn't the old lady. That old lady is back in this movie, and apparently she is one of these demon characters, kind of like Mike and Bob. I don't think she has a real name. She goes by a few different names in the movie and in the TV show, but she and her nephew, they are both, nephew or grandson, I can't remember, they're both in this movie, and I'm not really sure what kind of role they're playing here. Is the old lady trying to save Laura? Is she in cahoots with Mike? Is she got her own agenda entirely? We don't know. There's also this addition of these rings, and I guess the rings are somehow connected to the Black Lodge or the Red Room. I'm really not sure. I think the ring, if you put it on, it prevents these evil demons from taking over your body, I think. I'm not entirely sure. I think that's one of the running theories, if you will. But that's added into this movie, and that's not explained as much as I would have liked. I said earlier, I didn't have to have a full explanation of is Leland Palmer in control of his actions. The ring thing maybe could have been explained a little bit more. And speaking of elements of the mythos being confused a little bit, Annie, who is a character from season 2 of the series, she was Norma's younger sister. She's in this movie for about 30 seconds, and I'm not kidding, that's about how long she's in this movie. At one point, I guess we see her ghost, or we see a vision of her talking to Laura Palmer in her room, and she tells her something like, don't go into the red room, or something like that. But she's in this movie for so little that if you didn't know that that was Heather Graham, you'd be forgiven. In fact, I saw Heather Graham's name in the credits of the movie, and I still didn't know that that was Heather Graham's character, the character of Annie, who Heather Graham played in the series, because she's in this movie for so little, and I am very confused about what she's doing in this movie. Now, it's been a little while since I watched Twin Peaks the series, and I don't remember a lot of the stuff from Season 2. I didn't like Season 2 as much as I liked a lot of Season 1, and so I don't quite remember a lot of Annie's role in the series, but I don't remember her having a tie to the Black Lodge, or Mike, or Bob, or any of that stuff. I don't remember her being connected with any of that stuff, and yet here she is connected with all of that. And then you have other stuff, like, as I mentioned, Chet Desmond, he's the leading investigator on the Teresa Banks death, and then Adam Nowhere, he disappears. We don't know where he went. And then you have David Bowie. He's in this movie for about 1 minute. We find out that he used to be an FBI agent, and he just kind of appears out of nowhere, and he's yelling at Gordon Cole and Dale Cooper about he apparently went to the Black Lodge, and he saw all these demons having a meeting, and then he comes back to the real world, and then he disappears again. That's another one of those things that if this had just been the FBI of the Twin Peaks world having some weird, crazy adventure, I think that you could have had David Bowie, I almost said Dale Cooper, you could have had David Bowie be a bigger part of this movie, and you could have had him be this weird kind of transition between the real world and the Black Lodge. You could have had him do something like that, but he's shoehorned into the span of about 1 minute, and he makes things more confusing after he's gone instead of less confusing. He only makes things even harder to understand, and he doesn't make things any more clear than what they were. I don't have a whole lot more to say about this movie. I know I've talked about it for a really long time. My voice is starting to feel sore, but it turns out there was a lot to say about this movie, I think. But that's about all I had to say about the movie Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Basically, in my opinion, to sum everything up, if you are a fan of the TV series, if you've watched the TV series, this movie is going to be kind of hard to understand. I like parts of the TV series. I'm not a huge Twin Peaks fan, but I like things about the series, and I thought this movie was okay, but not really great. On a scale of 1 to 10, I would say maybe it's a 4. If you have not seen the Twin Peaks TV series, I do not recommend that you watch this movie. In fact, I think you will be extremely confused if you watch this movie. Probably, if you've never seen the Twin Peaks series, this will be the most confusing movie that you've ever seen in your entire life. And that's just, I'm not trying to underestimate potential audiences for this movie. I legitimately think if I had never seen the Twin Peaks series and I watched this movie, I would have just been sitting there staring at the screen saying, what? What is going on? This movie is definitely a companion piece to the Twin Peaks series. It's not something that you can watch on its own. But that's about all I have to say about the movie. Basically, that's my thoughts in a nutshell. I hope that you guys liked this review. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys later in the week with a different kind of video. And I'll see you guys next week with some other videos. So catch you guys later. Have a great rest of the day.